Israel is going to be in a real fix. Their main port in Haifa, as you know, is partially shut down. Maersk, one of the largest international shipping lines, it says we're not going there anymore. The Ben Gurion airport has been shut down. I heard it's going to be partially reopened, but I don't think there's a chance that any, you're not going to get any of the um, airliners from outside of Israel going there. Uh, so it's just like as long as like every few days Iran lobs a missile towards Haifa or towards Ben Gurion, it's just that Israel is in a fix. I'm sure they've already suffered very grievous economic damage. And this constant, they have suffered a minimal number of casualties, in spite of all the damage that's been done, because they do have a very good um, sheltering system, air raid shelters. And they do get their people down there. Now, I've heard it's a lot better for Jewish Israelis than it is for Arab Israelis. That's one thing. I think there were a number of actually Arab Israelis that were killed because they didn't have a shelter to go to. They, hadn't been built for their town. Um, so anyway, but constantly having going down those shelters, that again, just over time, it's going to wear a country down. It affects their economy, and this is a economy that's highly dependent on trade um, and tourism and so on and so forth. And that this is going to, so again, Iran, even if it is sort of on the ropes, as long as it can, land the occasional punch, it's Israel is going to be in real trouble.
Okay, so you think that as it's in real trouble, Israel is going to try to push for a ceasefire. Of course, though, whenever there's a ceasefire that Israel agrees to, it's like, okay, you guys stop shooting, but we can kind of do what we want. We saw that in Lebanon, we saw that in
Right.
Gaza. Do you think that there's actually a chance that Iran would agree to some type of ceasefire? Only if maybe they really don't have the missiles for perhaps to
Right.
engage in something like
Yeah,
this.
there's a chance, and that's right. I just kind of I raised these questions about Iran's Iran's military capabilities, and if the answer is that Iran is in serious trouble, it lacks the launchers or whatever, the air defense system really needs to be rebuilt. They might go for it, and it might make sense. It's just say, okay, yeah, we were caught off guard. We suffered this. We made the mistake of not working with the Russians to build up our air defense system. Okay, let's let them have their ceasefire, and we'll correct these mistakes, and we'll just be in a much stronger position when they attack again, because we can expect that they will. So that's a possibility. But yeah, if they feel that they actually have the Israelis on the ropes, that they in fact are not in danger of running out of missiles or launchers, that they have, maybe it's a weakened air defense system, but it's sufficient to keep, most aircraft out of their airspace. Uh, the incentive will be to continue. We'll see.
What's the situation like domestically for both these countries? If you look at Western media, it sounds like Iran, they're ready to rise up and get their rights back, and it's an overthrow, and
Yeah, everybody says, without exception, people across the political spectrum in Iran, that Iran has never been more unified. Again, all the people that were just uh, that were passionate opponents of the regime are have actually rallied to its support. And even some of these people, there's this Iranian expat community in the U.S. that tends to be very, very anti Islamic Republic, and they want to see the Shah's son put in power and all that. But even I was just hearing from one of them is saying that that like all our this has been a terrible turn of events for us. It's just like there was dissent in Iran. There was opposition, but that has evaporated, and it's actually just kind of like uh, it has ended basically. The opposition movement within Iran, and it's made the opposition movement outside of Iran just completely toothless at this point. People are very, very strongly unified, and they're angry. They're just they're very, very angry, and they want to fight.
I don't think Trump got that memo. He
Yeah.
seems to think that maybe.
Yeah.
Well, what about? So this is another thing that maybe potentially could help end this conflict is if there's something that changes domestically within Israel. As this pain rises for Israel, and their economy is at a standstill. I hear power plants that have been blown up, like they're having to go just to having to run into your shelter. Any type of daily life, running your economy
Right.
is just put to a stop. Like,
Right.
who's showing up to work now? So how much if this continues to go on, I imagine that there's going to be a lot of people pointing the finger at Benjamin Netanyahu and said, "You did this to us. You destroyed Israel." And will there be some type of revolt?
Well, okay, there's a potential for that. At the present time, no. There actually has been a kind of a rallying around the flag within Israel. And when it comes to the question of Iran, the Israelis in general trust their government. They trust the IDF, and even the opponents, of Netanyahu, of which there are many. Probably is a majority of the population would like to see him go, but the majority is actually strongly on the side of this attack at this point. But that may change over time. We see that happen a lot in wars. It's just like there's always this surge in popular support for one's own government when the war begins. But if it goes poorly, over time that ebbs away, and then people become increasingly angry. And I think that's what you would see, in Israel. Well, in large part because this was clearly a war of choice. For the Iranians, it's different. This is not something that we asked for, our government asked for. This is something you did to us. And so people are willing to understand. They suffer, and they understand why they have to suffer. They're suffering because of Israel. It's not because of their own government. But if, it goes on in Israel, you'd have to say, did this have to happen? This was something, the Iranians never did this to us until we attacked them. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea. So that opposition to Netanyahu that was so powerful prior to the launch of this war could very easily reconstitute itself, and Netanyahu could be pushed out, and maybe that could at least lead to a ceasefire. If that happens. I don't think there's any sign that that's going to happen soon. This has been successful. A lot of us have wondered if maybe that's the true motivation for this war. I think it's at least a part of it. This did get, let's say, get Netanyahu out of some real political hot water. He was in danger of losing control of his coalition and having to face a new election. He was, that close to it before this war began.
Do you think if there was a ceasefire in Israel right now that Israel could survive, or has the damage been so extensive in Israel that they may not be able to recover already?
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to do permanent damage to him. I don't think it means that Israel is going to collapse. It's going to continue to be subsidized by the U.S. and protected by the U.S., but it's not the same Israel. I think that was already true, after the Gaza horror began, and that people looked at that, and that has already changed the perceptions of Israel among many, many people. And then what this did again is it just it really put an end to the myth of Israeli invincibility. So even if it stops and Israel's still standing, there are blocks that have been wiped out in places like Tel Aviv. There was some real damage done, and we've never seen that before. We just haven't. And again, it's just that affects the long-term perception people have of Israel. People that maybe were looking to invest in Israel, people that were thinking about immigrating to Israel. I mean, I guess you'll find the zealots maybe will say, I need to go to Israel. But the people who don't share their zealotry are going to choose not to immigrate, or they're going to leave Israel. So I think it's just it's done permanent damage, and it's probably just going to accelerate, the trends that we've seen towards increasing isolation, and also towards increasing extremism within the country. And again, those people that are still reasonable are likely to leave, and the ones that are going to stay are the extremists, and that'll strengthen, the support for the Smotriches and the Ben Gavirs.
which just means more war.
Yeah, yeah, it does, unfortunately, but it also means increasing isolation, less support for Israel. And one of these days, that I think that will extend to the U.S. Again, it's just that you look at the polls of what younger Americans think about Israel, and it's that unquestioning support has already evaporated among them.
Right. What do you think is going to happen here domestically if Trump continues, to get more involved in Iran? Is this
Yeah,
I mean, this should be an impeachable offense, right? I mean, we have
right.
some people like Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene that are speaking out against it, but
Yeah.
it's just
Well,
strange. We will impeach Trump for, not, I don't, what was it? It's not sending enough weapons to Ukraine or delaying
yeah, the whole
something.
thing
And
was entirely bogus, right?
but here he actually launches an attack
Right.
on Iran, and he probably will
Yeah.
get impeached for it.
Yeah. There, I have to say, I'm not a big fan of hers, but OAC had proposed that, impeachment proceedings against Trump. And then also, it has to be said that with that, okay, it was that measure that was put before the House by Thomas Massey, and then who was the co-sponsor? Well, I think there are now a number of co-sponsors. Thomas Massey is the only Republican co-sponsor, and now there are something like 20 Democratic co-sponsors. This was on, insisting that now it's moot, basically, but it insists that President Trump, receive authorization from Congress before he launches, any attack on Iran.
Right. Just basically obeying the law that already exists
Yeah,
on the
right.
table.
Yeah, acting according to the Constitution. So anyway, so you find actually there is some opposition, on those grounds. Now, interestingly, you just don't find anybody, even the OAC, really talking about the malignant influence of the Israel lobby. And you are getting some talk about that, on the right side of the aisle. So Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene are saying, this is wrong. We should be, this clearly is something that's done for Israel and not being done for our own interests. And this shouldn't happen, right? But again, they are a minority. But I think like their argument, actually the argument that both the Democrats, are putting forward about constitutional restrictions on the actions of the president, and about the undue influence of the Israel lobby that is being put forward by at least some people on the Republican side, will resonate with a lot of the public. Because again, I just saw a poll, I think, right before we started this podcast that showed that like support for this military action, when you look at polls taken prior to previous military actions, you find that I think in the case of the Iraq war, it was something like, Afghanistan, it was like 88% or something in favor of attacking Afghanistan. And then it was a little bit lower, but still very, very high for Iraq. But this was way down there. We're talking like, what was it, 23%? It was well below water. And a very considerable, well, not a considerable majority, but a majority were definitely opposed to it. So this is different. I mean, Trump went into this with minimal support, and unlike previous presidents. Now, if he can just end it, with this most awesome bombing run of all time or whatever, he'll do fine. And actually, I think he'll receive a boost. But if it does turn into one of these forever wars, I'd say he's in real trouble. I mean, it's just like, again, there wasn't the popular support for it. I think there was the cynicism. Again, we heard all the talk about, we're just hearing the talk about weapons of mass destruction all over again. And I think a lot of people are saying, look, we're hearing this again. I'm sick of this. One of the reasons that I voted for Trump was that he said this wasn't going to happen, and it's happened. So it could turn sour. I think at this point it hasn't, but it could very well turn sour for Trump.
Do you think that America and much of the world is undergoing some kind of great awakening and understanding this relationship between Israel and the United States is something that is truly wrong? Something is not
Yeah.
correct here. This is an unholy relationship. The undue influence that Israel has over a country when it comes to foreign policy. It's just so many things within our government. Do you think that cat is out of the bag? We're seeing some pushback against, and people are really starting to question it. And then that's just sort of a silver lining of this whole all
Yeah.
unfolding
Yeah, it's
disaster.
there. It's still it's mostly among the young. It's still, on the fringes. The establishment is still firmly on the the side of Zionism, and really Zionism, which is now taking a very extreme form. And that's not just true in the U.S., but it's true in Western Europe. But the gap is such between perceptions among the general publics in these country and the policies of the establishment that I think those establishment policies are unsustainable in the long term. It's just a question of when, not if, there's going to be a change.
It's so there's so many things that could happen now. It's so hard to just
Yeah,
look at
right.
this, because it's like, what is Iran going to do? Or, are they going to build nukes? Are they going to retaliate? Is there going to be a false flag? What's Israel going to do? What's the United States going to do? What's Pakistan, China, Russia? There's just so many unknowns here. And it is, I'm always going down these different paths of like how this could potentially play out. And it just feels like 99% of the time it ends out bad. And then I'm hoping I'm wrong, that maybe there's a way we can just navigate out of this whole mess
Yeah,
without the use of nuclear weapons, or without widening regional conflict, potential World War III. But when I go down all these paths, at the end of the day, it all just comes down to Israel, and the fact that Israel, as long as it keeps on getting hurt, and it will continue to put pressure on the United States, and this war is just going to happen. I feel like that's at the end of the day the issue, and it's just not
yeah,
going to work out well. We can speculate how China is going to get involved, Russia, but it just
yeah.
it feels weird. We're at this stage where we committed this act of war against Iran, and now we're just kind of sitting around waiting. And I don't feel as panicked as I think maybe I should, because I know where this is heading. It's just kind of sitting around waiting,
Uh,
before this thing sets off. Is that how
right.
you're feeling it?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we're at a very uncertain moment in this whole thing. It could go in different directions. It depends on not just on the realities on the ground, of which our understanding is necessarily limited, and choices that will be made the in Tel Aviv and in Tehran. And I think if you look at Washington D.C., that obviously we're looking at Trump, and that's I think we can predict that he will just keep on going down this road.
Yeah.
I believe, maybe I'm wrong, and this whole thing was just a ruse to begin with, but I believe that he did actually want to pursue a negotiation track. But he got pressured off of that. He got talked into the Israeli attack, and then he got talked into this attack. And, he said, again, is this going to be sweet and clean this one off and he'll be a great hero? And right now it's looking pretty good for him. But for the reasons that we've talked about, the pressure will start to be on him to take the next step and to expand the attack, to openly push for regime change. And when that, we just see that it seems like when push comes to shove, Trump gives in and goes ahead. He listens to all the neocons and the Israel firsters that are around, that he's surrounded himself with. Let's be honest about that.